Hello, welcome to my channel. I'm recording this in December, but I think you'll probably be watching this in 2026. So this should be the first video of the new year. Happy New Year. I wanted to start with a nice positive card because I know a few of my recent videos have been more of a heavier energy. And this is actually Queen of Pentacles. This is this time of year with Capricorn. So it's seasonal too. Now, I'm also very excited because this now completes the Queens. And this is my favourite set of cards that I have made for this deck. And I'm really pleased with the Queen of Pentacles that I have made as well. And the song choice. So I'm going to quickly recap what I said about the Queens and how I see the Queen of Pentacles fitting within this set. So the Queens, we've had the pages and the knights. So the pages are more about curiosity, starting a journey, or starting a new part of our lives, exploring a new aspect to ourselves. The knight is more decisive. We are actually acting then. That is more going towards our goals. Now, the Queens and the Kings, I think, are more about power and authority. We are by then in more of a position of kind of experience. And I would say that the King and the Queen exercise their power slightly differently. And I was trying to think of a non-gendered way of explaining this, or how I see it. And I was thinking about when I worked in a school very briefly, and how I'm sure it's in most schools, especially big schools, that you have the head teacher and then you have the deputy teacher, or even several deputy teachers. And the head teacher is a little bit more of a distant, detached figure. They are the ones that are dealing with the governing body and, outside agencies or whatever. They're much to do with the finances, probably don't teach themselves, and probably have more of a hands-off relationship with the kids and the staff. Whereas the deputy is can be more of a mediator between the senior management and the rest of the staff. And certainly, probably will still teach, probably will still have kind of more of a day-to-day, like, nurturing side. They're the ones in charge. Probably if you were upset, you would go to the deputy rather than the head teacher. And I think that possibly describes the roles quite well in how they relate to the Queen and the King. So King, more detached, in charge, sense of objectivity. Queen, more stuck in. I think when the Queen comes up in a reading, it's usually ourselves, an aspect of ourselves, or someone else. It's usually a person rather than a situation. And I think an interesting question when the Queen arrives, especially when it's to do with yourself, is to think, how much am I aware of how much power I have in this situation? The Queen often comes up for me when I and maybe resisting how much power I have, maybe don't notice that I have more influence than I think, both good and bad. And certainly a kind of a reminder that there are lots of, just because you're in charge doesn't mean you don't have a lot of a lasting influence on someone. Right, so let me just quickly go through the different cards. So we had the Queen of Wands, charismatic, life of the party, outgoing, can be a drama queen, wants to be the centre of attention. So she's very at her best. So I'm using gender, but so at their best. The Queen can be, very warm and good company. At their worst, there can be something a little bit sneaky about them, I think. And, not everything that they seem. There is something performative, a little bit artificial about them sometimes. They're putting on an act. And I suppose this is why I chose Babushka, to get kind of into that sort of darker side of the Queen. Now, with the Queen of Cups, this is the sort of person that knows you're upset possibly without you even having to say something. They're very intuitive. They're very caring. The danger of that is they wear themselves out. So they're often in a caring or sort of professions like nursing or teaching or something. And they can easily get burnout. They need to set boundaries. A darker side is that they can start becoming manipulative and assert their power that way, but they can also be manipulated themselves if they're not careful. So this was more of the Mother Stands for Comfort song. Here we have Leave It Open, and we have the Queen of Swords. Queen of Swords is a truth teller, a lawyer, someone who is very good at getting to the root of a problem. The main shadow side of the Queen is that sometimes their truth-telling can be too harsh, lacks the gentleness and the charm of the other cards. But also that while the Queen may be very good at spotting other people's faults, like everyone, they're not always good at seeing their own failings or their own bias or judgments. And this is where the idea of harm is in us comes into play, the idea of how damaging our words can be if we're not careful. And the idea of that we let the weirdness in, being the embracing our differences and how that can be a counterbalance to that prejudice and that judgment. I think what I'll do is I will link, if any of these, and this one especially, probably I'll say a lot more in the original video. So if any of them, you feel curious about any of them, I will link them. So let's go to the Queen of Pentacles. She comes up for me when I need grounding. I have really changed my view of the Queen of Pentacles over the years. When I first started tarot about 15 years ago, I was a bit resistant to the Queen and saw them as probably a bit of like a Monica from Friends or Brie from Desperate Housewives, and quite sort of controlling, conforming, probably too materialistic. And it was an energy that I felt resistant to. But now I have changed my mind, and I suppose, especially with the climate crisis that we are in, that, the Pentacles can represent resources and money, but resources can also represent the earth. So I very much wanted to do a positive side to this card, and maybe a different, almost an answer to my own prejudice about this card 15 years ago. So I've turned around. So this is from Red Shoes, and it's nice we've got different eras. So we've got Never Forever, Hounds of Love, and we've got The Dreaming, haven't we? So this is later, and it is Kate Bush is wearing this. I think she wore it for a photo shoot. It's got kind of Eat the Music vibes, hasn't it? But I think it's a lot better for this song, actually, because of the way she's sitting. Eat the Music is such a lively song. And I thought she looked very regal the way she's sitting here. And I loved the way she's got this bare foot. I put her on a slight angle so we could just have this foot, because that seemed about very Queen of Pentacles, walking through the grass barefoot, this connection to the earth and nature. And I've tried, where possible in the Pentacles, to have some sort of nature images, because actually Kate Bush uses quite a few nature images in her songs. So in the Song of Solomon, which is based on the book in the Bible, and I was trying to find something that Kate Bush herself said about this song, and I couldn't find anything, so this is my own interpretation. But I think of it like Red Shoes is a really difficult album, because she seems to be going through this breakup, and I assume it's related to her breakup with Del Palma, and then she's going into her new relationship, I feel, as well, with Danny McIntosh. So there's this kind of her letting go of the past and her excitement, I think, maybe, or a new way of expressing herself in a new relationship, maybe. And this is like the answer to Solomon, to the king, is this woman kind of embracing her sensuality, her sexuality, and claiming it for herself, this power there, which I think we don't always associate with the Queen of Pentacles, because we kind of see her as this safe, careful figure. But here she is kind of claiming that kind of position, and that womanhood is sort of that connection with the earth and nature. This was from my book about Bible flowers. I feel there's confusion over what the Rose of Sharon actually was that's mentioned in the Bible, and I think this should be more of a tulip, so it probably should be more of a reddy colour. And then I got, some people think it's like a more of a hibiscus. I don't know. Anyway, so a little bit confusion about what. It's not a rose. That's the main thing. And anyway, I liked the pink going with the green, and this sense of, I wanted a powerful, strong card to connect with all of these. And it's a beautiful song because I love the trio Bulgarka, and that, I've just said that I didn't really want too much of a gendered view of these cards, and certainly not for tarot, but I suppose it's interesting what Kate Bush herself has said about those, because she hasn't really, I'm trying to think of the voices she uses. I think Trio Bulgarka was the first female voices backing vocals she ever used. So it's interesting in that sense. There definitely seems to be a shift in how around Sensual World and Red Shoes about Kate Bush herself and how she expresses herself and how she expresses her femininity, which is an interesting thing to also reflect on, I think, in terms of these queens. This is a very different energy to these two, for example. Right. I think that's all I want to say about Queen of Pentacles. But as I said, she's, when this card comes up, it is a reminder for me to sort of nurture myself, to be kind to myself. And that's a good reminder, I think, this time of year, especially, part of the world I am where it's very cold and dark, to be patient with ourselves too. So thanks for watching, and enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye.